challenges in distribution and logistics that we really faced throughout the whole of 2022 are now being managed better, and the timelines are coming in. Thus, maybe some of the difficulties in completing schemes and getting materials will be a Q1, possibly Q2 scenario. Welcome back to another edition of the weekly property market update with super prime valuation specialist myself, Rob Cohen.
Myself, James Wild.
All good, James?
Very good, thanks, Rob. How about yourself? You well?
Yeah, really good, thank you. We are full in flow of 2022. The weeks are ticking by. February is nearing, and the information, intel, is coming thick and fast, and we are sharing all of that with you as we do week in, week out. And as always with this show, we go straight into the intel and the data. And so, James, tell everyone what's been happening and what are the early trends for 2022.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And as we move into week 3 of January 2022, we've had a couple of weeks of data for yourselves. Obviously, last week we had around 100 transactions here in London. This week we're up slightly to 107 London transactions. And the pipeline, Rob, the last couple of weeks, it's been slightly constrained. We've only had a couple of hundred new instructions, new weekly instructions, that is. And most of last year, we were averaging about 350 a week. So we haven't sort of come out the blocks counter, but the market is still operating, and we're slowly getting some momentum in the market as we move into the third, fourth week of January 2022.
Yeah, I think, as always, going into a new year, there's a lag, both in timings of data and intel, and also the markets haven't stopped for a few weeks. It takes things time to get back in the flow and get that pipeline built up. And already we're seeing that, I would say that we've hit the ground running this year. I would say that quicker than normal levels are returning, and I would imagine by the end of the month will be a stable path.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Rob. And one of the factors I think that also sort of affects the data slightly is that a lot of companies are actually closed over Christmas and New Year, which isn't the norm. The property market is still operating, especially in those right up to Christmas Eve. We've been out and done valuations ourselves, Rob, and in those sort of 3-4 days between Christmas and New Year, there'll be solicitors working in the background and valuers inspecting and reporting back. This year, a lot of companies are actually closed, so the market is sort of it's getting off from a complete standing start in the first week in January.
I would also say that with the latest stage of the virus, the uncertainty of whether someone should be moving, buying, selling, renting, has slowed people's decision making down, because they just want to make sure when they make that big decision that they're making it on the basis of a clear run this year. And I think over the coming weeks, consumer confidence and general confidence across the UK and the wider economy will grow as we see the effect of this wave diminishes, and thus with that confidence you'll see the markets moving quicker and people making the decisions. Yes, I want to rent. Yes, I want to sell. Yes, I want to buy. The other thing that I am noting very early on is the refinance market is strong. And again, prime, super prime, already at the beginning of this year, there is, I would say, a reasonable high level of activity. And I think that's a continuous trend from the back end of last year and the numbers we closed out with last week, it seems to me that has just now continued through to 2022, and that could be the theme as the year progresses.
Yeah, I'd say from our own perspective, in terms of valuation and us going out to do mortgage valuations for refinance and also a number of purchases, we have started the year off very busy, busier than a lot of previous years. And just judging by the pipeline in some of the under offer figures which we're bringing you, that it is positive. It's 140, 152 this week in terms of under offer properties, which could move through in terms of sold in the next week or two. So I think, like I say, Rob, that there's a pipeline there for the market to fully get up to speed, hopefully by the end of the month, and as we sort of move through the year. Just in terms of some other property news, obviously brought you news last week of the 5 Broadgate selling in a massive sale over in the city, £1.25 billion. Google this week have bought the Renzo piano designed Central St Giles development for a price in the range of £730 million as it sort of commits its future really to physical office working. And Google intends for the building complex located in the West End, not too far from our offices here, Rob, just close to Oxford Circus, an area that's been really hard hit by sort of office workers working from home. It's going to serve as one of Google's headquarters, with them also intending to fully refurbish those offices, and a move that I think, Rob, it's going to change the way in that people attend the office. There's going to be some more draw factors. It's going to be more large companies' offices. They're going to be like sort of campuses. It's going to have more sort of flexible working space and factors that will draw people into the office, maybe some placemaking and additional on-site facilities there.
Yeah, I think that's a real statement of intent, and I think it's a real statement for the market and a great one to happen so early in 2022. As you said, very close to Tottenham Court Road, so strategically it's very well located. I know the building very well, and it's an emblematic building really. It's become that way because of its occupancy by Google and the colour schemes that it shows, and I think people will be positively pleased by such a transaction and such a statement on the back of the Bishopsgate?
The Broadgate
transaction, from the week before. So 2 really high-level transactions so early in the year.
Definitely, and sort of Google as a company, they've got their annual turnover is £130 billion. One of the largest companies in the whole world. So in the scheme of things, although it's a massive landmark acquisition at 730 million, in terms of against their turnover, it's a sort of fairly de minimis sum really, which is crazy in the scheme of things. In the background, in terms of Google as a company, they're still creating their King's Cross campus, sort of just up the road from here, which is going to comprise a number of buildings and facilities. And it's going to be campuses in itself in terms of the facilities which it's going to provide. And just as in terms of a company, Google, 6,500 employees in the UK currently. With all this new space that they're building and acquiring, they're going to have room for about 10,000 UK employees. So I think that's maybe going to be a growth sector here in London and the UK, which I think is again a positive factor for the London office market there. And just whilst we're on that, the current government guidance for people to work from home, this is going to be reviewed on the 26th of January, so leading us up to the end of this month. So I think it's anticipated, Rob, and we're maybe sort of hopeful as well that there's going to be some relaxation of those sort of rules and advisory notes to work from home until that point. So we'll follow that closely and bring you news in a couple of weeks' time on where we are with that.
Great. Thanks, James.
In terms of some fiscal news, the ONS, Office of National Statistics released some data this week. Unemployment has fallen 0.1% to 4.1% for the latest figures. As Britain's jobs market, it's performed well despite the back end of last year and some of the COVID-19. The outbreak we had in terms of the Omicron variant there. So I think the job market has withstood that threat. Just as we look in the employment sector, there's in terms of wage forecasts, we're at 3.5% for 2022, Rob, and with inflation being forecast for 5%, there's going to be that gap in terms of real wages, possible reduction for 2022. And the year ahead, is it going to be dominated by sort of the cost of living going up versus sort of labour shortages? And how do you think that's going to affect, what impact it's going to have on the property market?
Well, I think it was reassuring to see that the GDP and growth forecasts were positive for 2022, strongly on the back of a really good performance in the construction, the property industry.
Yeah.
I think that all feeds into the labour market and hopefully wage growth. And then it's the impact of the inflationary cost of living that we're seeing at the moment, and how the wage growth and the employment situation and the GDP growth in the UK can balance that position out. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the UK economy does perform. I would say indicators are good. Ultimately, a strong economy is reliant on employment levels being high and wage growth. Obviously, the main concern against that is the cost of living going up and the inflationary pressures we are seeing. At the same time, I think more property and construction specific, we are being informed and told that the challenges in distribution and logistics that we really faced throughout the whole of 2022 are now being managed better, and the timelines are coming in. Thus, maybe some of the difficulties in completing schemes and getting materials will be a Q1, possibly Q2 scenario, and maybe not much further on to that, which will be a huge relief for everyone in development or in light or heavy refurb projects.
Yeah, like you say, Rob, in terms of that inflationary, the inflationary pressures, I think it won't be too long before you see another interest rate rise, just to get that under control, as the government does not want that sort of gap in between the real wage growth being affected by inflation, and obviously. In terms of affordability of UK housing, it's under further pressure with house prices increasing by double digits in a lot of regions in 2021. Like you say, Rob, the UK economy has now exceeded the pre-COVID levels with better than expected, as you say, and sort of large UK national house builders such as Persimmon Homes announced last week of slightly increased turnovers and revenue, which is positive, and hopefully some of the material shortages, timber and other construction materials have become more available with builders merchants being able to source materials. Just a last final piece in terms of some trophy assets. I've brought you a couple of large major sales in terms of the office sector. In terms of residential market, the Southways estate in Guildford has come to the market this week for a figure £23.5 million. However, it's not your ordinary trophy asset. It's been listed for sale by the receivers, so I'm sure to attract a lot of interest there. All in all, just under 30,000 square feet across 3 houses, all in around 15 acres. So there's likely to be another trophy asset selling there in the residential Surrey market.
Excellent, James. Great news, great intel for this week. Something I have been seeing to close out this week, following all of the socials and all of the messages that we're receiving, there's a lot of positivity out there. I think there's a lot of hope that 2022 is going to be a really good year, health-wise and economy-wise and life-wise. And and that we can return to some kind of new way of living, but embracing all the good that there is in work and life and beyond. And that excites me a lot. It excites me to see you all sharing your stories, sharing your positivity, sharing your good vibes. And all I can do is endorse and promote more of that. It's what I love to see. I think it is everything that's great about what social platforms provide. It's what we try to provide every week in the most positive way. And I'm just grateful and thankful for what we receive on that basis, but everything that everyone else is putting out, I think we need to keep that going, keep a really strong, positive start to 2022, and let's make this a really good year in all aspects of personal and professional life. And on that, thank you for another week. Thank you for your great support across all the platforms. As I said, keep sharing, keep watching, keep listening, and we will see you all again next week. Thank you everyone so much. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks very much, everyone.